Good morning, Joe here. I'm here to talk today about a little bit of what it takes. And good morning. I'm here to talk. Like I was mentioning, got sidetracked here about a little about what it takes to really do the deep work to unpack our own privilege, to unpack my privilege. I won't speak for anyone else. I'll just talk about what I've learned in my experiences doing such things. So I want to take a moment and acknowledge anyone. If you're watching the replay or if you're watching live, I see someone's watching live now, say hi to me. I'd love to know who is watching. I'd love to know who I'm talking to. I'm tired of monologue. Hey Nelly, good to see you. Good morning. I'm here to talk today about what happened when I started unpacking my privilege 4 years ago, how stubborn I was, the things I learned through that process, the things that I saw other people experiencing that I want to help others avoid as they go through this process, and the things that I really want others to avoid that were painful for me. Now, I don't want you to think that I'm asking you to avoid pain when it's time to unpack your privilege or shame or guilt or fear. You're going to have all of that. But there's a pitfall that happens that keeps us from actually taking action and keeps us from changing at a deeper level and keeps us from getting involved in the collective liberation movements that I want to talk about today. So whether you're watching now, whether you're watching live or in the replay, I want to know something. Give me a yes in the comments if you're ready to do more unpacking of your own privilege, but you have fear about the process. Or give me a yes in the comments if you feel guilt or shame in the last few weeks due to your own complex identity, especially around gender or race. I'm talking about this because I'm feeling it again. 4 years ago, I set out to try and make changes and educate myself about my power, my privilege as a white man in the world, cisgendered, heterosexual man. And I never imagined how much I would learn and how much it would transform me and help me understand who I am and how the world works and even how my work with my clients works. And right now, I'm in positions of leadership in multiple communities I'm in that are requiring some leadership that has real understanding of privilege and inclusivity and difference and all of the intersectionality and all the complexity that we need to hold. And I gotta be honest, I'm fucking afraid. I'm really afraid. Like I am. There's things that I'm worried about doing. There's about 4 things this week, including this video and something I'm writing, and leadership in a men's group that I'm in with my synagogue, and leadership in a large organizational men's group, where I am taking action through courage, but I'm afraid of fucking up. And so I wanted to talk about this today to share my experiences that I've gone through, and to help others, but to help me too. So again, I want to hear it. If you are a person right now who has been feeling really complex emotions, you want to make a difference, you want to do deeper work to start unpacking your privilege, or maybe you've already been doing it like me and you want to go further to see a more clear truth and reality, then I want you to go ahead and say me in the comments. If you're someone who's had an experience of guilt or shame in the last few weeks because of your unique identity, be it around race or gender, I want you to say me in the comments. I know I'm asking for a lot. I'm asking for vulnerability and boldness here, but it's going to take courage to stand up and say, I'm working on me so that our world can be a better place. So now I'm going to go into the story. I'm going to share a little bit about what I've learned about myself and about what I learned by being stubborn when I first decided to unpack my privilege. So I've talked in the last few weeks about how about 4 years ago, the summer of 2016, I was crushed by what I was seeing in the news. And I knew that the pain I was feeling had to be 1,000 times less than the pain of people who were being oppressed and violated and abused and killed. And it rocked me for a few days. So I set out to start learning, and the universe was looking out for me because eventually I found myself in a position where a man had invited me to join what was supposed to be a reading group by Surge, Showing Up for Racial Justice, DC. But it ended up being a deeply transformative men's group. And the group was supposed to be doing study and conversation on the intersectionality of race and gender, specifically maleness and masculinity, and whiteness as a culture. And so I jumped in. I jumped in ignorantly, I jumped in stubbornly, I jumped in because I thought I knew more than I did, And I experienced so much challenge, even doing my work to unpack my privilege in a group of other white men who were around my age, who were even more liberal, who were more radical than me, who've been doing the work on immigration and anti-racism and doing the inner work for themselves around seeing the world in a different place for many years. And I saw a few things. One was I came in and looking back, I saw myself as arrogant. I thought I knew more than I knew. And I thought I knew what these men needed. And in some ways I was right, and in some ways I was very wrong. I saw men that were spending years in deep relationship with people who want collective liberation, and men who were spending their time and energy on social justice projects, either professionally or as a side gig. And I also saw men that were tearing themselves apart or had been torn apart in many ways. They had done the powerful unpacking of privilege and they were continuing to do it, but they didn't necessarily have the skills to understand that just because people like them have caused problems in the world, it doesn't mean that they're bad people. So I saw men that were doing powerful work in the world. They were smarter than me, they were further along than me, they were teaching me so much, but they were tearing up themselves at a soul level and a mental level. And it was causing them to show up in ways in those movement spaces that were unconsciously bleeding on others and hurting others, right? So I was arrogant, I thought I knew more, I was stubborn. They would try and teach me things, and because they didn't seem like men that were grounded enough or knew enough about the psychology of our identities and our emotions, I assumed that they didn't have a lot to teach me. Now eventually, we got to a place a few months in where I surrendered to what those men knew and what they saw. But I was stubborn. I thought I was right. I thought that there was a lot of BS and rhetoric that was saying that it's not okay to be a man, it's not okay to be white. I was really upset and frustrated. And I'd been doing deep work on emotions and transformation of self, mind, body, and spirit for like 4.5, 5 years at this point. And I still had a big struggle because what was really happening was I don't like to not know, and I don't like to be confused. And these men were presenting perspectives and content and ideas and literature and articles that had me confused. And so I assumed I knew more than they in some way. And I was rumbling with all this guilt and shame that I didn't even know I had about a white male identity. But at the same time, I could see that I couldn't go down the same path of shredding apart this healthy identity that I'd spent years building, because for people who know my story, I had no faith in men, and I had no faith in masculinity, and I had no connection to the power of my own masculine identity, and I didn't trust men. And I just spent 4 or 5 years rebuilding that trust and learning to be someone who felt proud of who he was. And I see so many men in the world that are walking this world through shame and who feel obligated and don't respect themselves. And I want a place for all people to feel more liberated, more empowered, more loving of self. So I was confused and I was arrogant and I was stubborn and I experienced shame and anger and guilt and I experienced fear. I kept thinking I'm going to say or do something wrong and these guys will hate me and then I won't have a place to understand this or do my work. And I kept thinking that I had to help them see the things that I saw, because they were helping me see the things that they saw. But the truth was, that took trust, and it took patience, and it took time. And honestly, it took probably 6, 7, 8 months into that first year of a 3-year men's group unpacking our whiteness and masculinity. It took that long, maybe 6, 7, 8 months, for them to trust me and to see some of the vision that I had for their capacity to be more whole in their process of wanting to heal the world. So the thing was, I was afraid, I was experiencing guilt, I was experiencing shame, but I kept showing up because I'm a guy who will go where it's uncomfortable because I know that's where I grow and transform. I was stubborn because I kept showing up. I was stubborn because I thought that I saw things that they needed to know and didn't wait to learn what they had to teach me before I tried to force my opinions on them. And it created tensions, especially the most radical dude in the group, who's a brilliant man who I love to death. We had butted heads a bunch at the beginning. because I was not willing to have this experience of seeing men tear down their identities and thinking that was part of collective liberation, thinking that was part of good healing work for others, good transformative work for others. Now, I know now that we do have to disintegrate. We do have to tear apart parts of our being. We do have to lose parts of ourselves that we identify with. And we do have to be confused. We do have to be frustrated. We have to move through the anger and the guilt and the shame. But we don't have to do it in a way where we completely deteriorate our worthiness in the process. In fact, it takes courage and groundedness in our sense of self. It takes the capacity to understand our emotions, which again takes confidence and a grounded sense of self, to really do great work when it comes to unpacking your privilege, to learning about the ways that you are part of systemic injustice, that I am part of systemic injustice, and it's a long road. So I want to start teaching left and right how people can build the skill set and the mindset to be on that long road forever, because we don't just figure it out today or tomorrow or this week or next week or the next 6 months, the next 6 years. Even if there's radical policy change, even if there's radical social change in this country, we will still need to learn more and more about our complex identities that have been racialized and gendered for many years, so that we can have a better sense of self and that we can make a better world that is healthier and more whole for all. By the time I went to my third training on racial justice, social justice, I finally heard about collective liberation. Why? Because I kept showing up even when it hurt, even when I was afraid. And that collective liberation showed me exactly what I couldn't see before, that these men in this men's group, they were right. That the literature I was reading and watching from women and from people of color who were teaching me about what I didn't know about my own self, my own people, my own identity, my own masculinity, my own whiteness, my own world that I walk in, they were right. They were so right. They saw so much more than me. But that didn't mean that I was wrong. The things that I saw in those men were true. And when I learned about collective liberation, I learned that it was about all of us becoming more free. So I want to challenge everyone to understand that there's this need to hold complexity of your privilege if you want to unpack it. It's a process that will take a strong capacity to face your guilt, your shame, your fear, your confusion. But you can do it without losing value in yourself, without deteriorating yourself. You can disintegrate and recreate who you are without it being a process that's based on shame, because those of us that are privileged have been taught to motivate us and to create change based on the identities that drive us into being shameful. Being a high achiever, being right all the time, being politically correct, using proper language, being successful in school, being successful in business. These are constructs that we succeed in, but they're often based on shame-based managerial systems, leadership systems, and internalized systems for motivation, and they don't work. So one of the things I really, really want to say for anyone who may be watching is that just because people like you have consistently devalued, defaced, violated others, just because you've been blind and people like you have hurt others, just because you've made mistakes and you contributed to a world that was built on white supremacy, and you contributed to a world that perpetuated male privilege or perpetuated whatever privilege you have experiences with. There's people that you would never know have tremendous privilege, and they have tremendous privilege. There's people that have all kinds of oppressions that are intersectional in their experience of life and their identity that you would never know about, right? So for all of us, just because we're doing the work to deconstruct and dismantle the parts of us that are blind, the parts of us that are privileged, doesn't mean you have to devalue yourself and get rid of your own sense of worthiness to rumble with the shame and the guilt and the fear and the anger and the frustration and the confusion. It means it's time to question your reality, to question your behavior, to question your beliefs, to question how you contribute to the world's oppression or freedom or liberation. And it's hard work to do because you have to heal yourself in the process of learning to be a better human to others. And that's complicated, but it's so worth it. So I'm going to stop for a second. I'm going to see if there's anyone commenting. I imagine there might be. I'm going to see what we got going on. Nelly, you're commenting. Brittany, hey, what's going on, Brittany? Uh, Donnie, what's up, Donnie? All right, yeah, I hear you. So, yeah, I'm trying to be courageous, Nelly. I am. And life does have a way of humbling us. But in those moments that life's humbling us, those are the moments that we can actually slow down and feel the feelings, and we can learn and we can grow. Yeah, transformation does occur outside of our comfort zones. So the reality is we have to get uncomfortable, but we've not been taught to learn how to be uncomfortable and to disintegrate parts of ourselves without shredding our sense of self and our worthiness and our wholeness. And I, for one, am for whatever it takes, including people like me having really hard experiences of complex emotions and being confused and losing a sense of self and losing a certain amount of power that we have, or I should say transferring, right? I'm not losing any power. I'm sharing control. I'm sharing potential. I'm sharing privilege, which actually is an exponential growth equation. But maybe that's another video. What I want to do right now is I want to ask you, if you're watching now or in the replay, I want to ask you, when have you learned that your choices or behaviors have harmed or perpetrated another? And then got stuck in shame or guilt. Now, I don't mean just around race or gender. I mean in your life, in your romantic relationships, at work, with your children, with your parents, in your community, with a neighbor. When have you learned that your choices or behavior have harmed others, without you knowing, without you seeing clearly the impact? When have you accidentally perpetrated and you didn't even realize it, and then once you learned, you got stuck in shame or guilt and you avoided that person or that situation, or you just walked on eggshells, right? We've all done it. When have you tried to do some deep work on yourself, on your mind, on your soul, or your relationship, or your career, but you were afraid of screwing up and making mistakes, and you avoided making the courageous choice of continuing to go after what you knew was right, even though it was hard? This is we all do this. I'm raising both hands here. We all do this. I'm raising both hands. You're not alone. You're not alone. And because I'm raising my hands and I'm saying that I have been stubborn, I have avoided discomfort, I have felt guilt and shame when I've learned about ways I've hurt and harmed people, it's still happening. Something happened with me and my partner this week where, like, the next morning I woke up and I was full of shame, and so I did one of my own shame transformation processes so I could move out of that and still be in connection with her and love her and do my work in the world. We all do this. I'm raising my hands. I'm asking you to raise your hands. If you've done this, if right now you have fear about having hard conversations, if right now you're avoiding some of the complexity and the challenge of moving into unpacking our privilege, no matter who we are, if there are parts of your life where it seemed like it was too hard for you to do the courageous thing because you were consumed by guilt and fear, because you didn't know what to do next, then I want you to raise your hand too. I know I'm asking for something bold and vulnerable and honest, but I want you to raise your hand, either with the hand raise emoji or simply by saying me or yes. Say me or yes right now to let other people know they're not alone, to let me know I'm not alone. Let's see who's chiming in here. Yeah, Nellie's with me, Ben is with me. What's up, y'all? I love it. We all do this. I've done this. I've gotten caught in guilt and shame, and that's kept me from taking action. That's kept me from going deeper into discovering what is needed for me to feel more love and liberation in the world and create change in myself and to create change in others. But when it comes to the hard stuff like unpacking privilege, I've been stubborn as fuck. And I've stepped on toes, and I've made mistakes, and I've felt like an idiot over and over and over again. And I've thought that I could go be the one to help and heal other people in the spaces of collective liberation, and I've learned over and over again that I often believe I'm ready before I am. So yeah, we've often all done this. We've been the person who's avoided the rumble because we're so steeped in the guilt and shame cycle, and it's kept us from really truly changing. So I want you to take this one thing away. Anyone that's watching now, anyone that's watching the replay, I want this one takeaway for you. If you're ready to unpack your privilege, if you're ready to do work on the shadows within yourself, if you're ready to do that work so that you can help co-create a more equitable and just world, a world that's more inclusive, a world where we are all moving towards collective liberation, a world where people who don't have the same identities and experiences of life and privileges as you have more privilege and power and peace and capacity to walk this world without fearing death or destruction or violation, or without fearing that around every corner they might be disadvantaged in some way, then you must get good at rumbling with your shame and your guilt and your fear, while still owning that you are worthy as a human being while you go through this process of evolution. Evolution. I'll repeat that. If you are ready to unpack your privilege to make this world a more equitable, a more just, a more inclusive space where people are liberated instead of dominated, where everyone has freedom, and women and people of color or people that don't look like you have more safety in this world and more capacity to generate the life that they want, that we all want love, peace, freedom, and aliveness. If you want that world, then it's time to get good at rumbling with shame and guilt and fear without it deteriorating your sense of self and your worthiness, while still owning that you're a whole human being and being stubborn by continuing to show up to the experiences that will help you learn, even when it may not feel like the right thing to do, even when it might feel like the scary thing to do, or the privileged thing to do, or the blind thing to do. So that's what I got for you today. I want to express tremendous gratitude for your attention and your time. I believe that your attention and time are two of the most valuable resources on this planet, second and third only to your love. So thank you for being here. And I want to remind you that you can create a life that you want. You can co-create the world that you want. We can co-create change in ourselves and in the world. And we can do it while unpacking our privilege in a conscious way. We can do it while rumbling with our complex identities in a conscious way. We can do it without destroying our soul. We can do it by becoming more whole in the process. And I want to remind you that you have the capacity to change anything in your life, and you have the capacity to create your life and the world in the vision that you want it. And there's 3 choices that you get to make every day. And when you stack enough of these choices on top of each other, your life is completely changed over the course of 6 months or 8 months or 10 months or a year or 10 years or 20 or 30 years. You got to choose love over fear. You got to choose courage over comfort and creation over consumption. I love you. Peace. I'm out. If you're not in Drop the Armor Dojo, I'm going to drop a link. Join the dojo. We are people who are ready to rumble and love each other and love ourselves in the process. I'll talk to you soon. Dojo folks, see you tomorrow. Peace.